Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Accelerate webinar series hosted by the University of Denver's Daniels College of Business Executive Education Department. I'm Camila Angelin, Assistant Director of Business Development, and I'll be your host today. The Accelerate webinar series is designed to help you accelerate your capacity to deliver results for your organization. We call on some of our best faculty to provide you with insights relevant to your particular context. Our webinar today will be about 25 minutes, starting with a brief presentation and then moving to questions and answers at the end. At the bottom of the screen, you will find a Q&A icon, so feel free to submit a question whenever you'd like, and we will address that at the end. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, please know that we will try to answer it offline and then get back to you with an email on that. Today, we're pleased to welcome Scott McLagan. Scott is Professor of Practice in the Management Department and the Director of the Bailey Program for Family Enterprise at the Daniels College of Business. Scott is known for having a framework for every business situation. And today, he will be talking to us about how our brain reacts under stress. Scott, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Camila. Well, good morning, everybody, and hopefully you see a brain on your screen. I'm really glad to welcome you into my basement here on this snowy day, and I get to talk about something that I love, and that is to talk about the brain. Over the last 10 years or so, I've spent a lot of time studying and researching the brain to understand it, understand how it impacts our behavior, how it impacts our relationships, etc. And today I'm going to talk about how it reacts under stress, which a few of us are feeling these days given the situation. And what's important to understand is so much of what happens in our brain is unconscious to us. It very much impacts our mood, it impacts the way we think, but more often than not, we don't know what's really happening under the hood, if you will. And so what I hope to do today is give you a sense of what happens with your brain when you're stressed, and finish with maybe a few tips on how to manage that. So one of the first things I always like to do is make a distinction between pressure and stress. We often, I think, misuse the word stress these days. So pressure is the things that happen external to us that basically make our brain think of things as a threat. So we all have them. We all have the threats of the pressures of day-to-day life. And what happens is that those pressures inside of our brain and turn into the interpretation is it's a threat, and our brain then gets stressed. So stress is what your brain does with the pressures of life. Now, there are just a couple of things going on right now in our world with the COVID crisis. And if you think about it, it's a great example for us to look at stress. We have all had a major disruption in our lives as a result of this COVID crisis. And what that does to us is there are several things. Some of them may not seem like big deals, but all of these factors that are over on the right tend to drive our breaths into a threat response. We are habitual creatures as human beings, and the fact that our day-to-day routines are disrupted really hits us. Some of us may have some concerns about ours or our family's physical health. We may have some concerns about us or our family's financial health. A couple other things that drive our brain crazy. Number one, we like predictability. We do not like a situation of uncertainty. So sitting here today worrying about when will everything open up and how do I predict what's going to be happening this summer, next fall, those drive our brain crazy. I had a friend of mine the other day say, just interestingly, I just wish I could go out a year from now and look back and see what happened. And that is just basically your uncertainty stressor kicking in, because we so desperately want to know and be able to predict what's going to happen to us. We also don't like being in control. We like having some level of control. And finally, a very important one is the whole social distancing thing really impacts us, because we are social beings. And there are some of us are home alone, and now we would have loneliness as a stressor. Some of us have a house full of people, and that chaos and that disruption is getting to us. So we're living in the world right now where our brain is feeling a lot of threat. Now let's talk about what happens in our brain as we have increasing levels of pressure or threat. So think about from the bottom of this model to the top. At the bottom of the model, imagine that you are at a very, very calm place. Think about being on a vacation or having a long weekend where you don't have any pressures and you have that ability to just relax. And at that point, we have the maximum access to both our cognitive capability, which is our ability to think and reason, and our maximum ability to connect with other people and to empathize. So think about yourself as your brain is wide open. As we dial up the threat in our environment, what happens is a chemical cocktail goes through our blood system. Depending on the level of arousal, you may have adrenaline, but we certainly have a very important chemical called cortisol, which is called the stress hormone. And the stress hormone goes into our bloodstream based on the level of perceived threat. So as the level of perceived threat goes up, our brain closes down. So think about it as stages of narrowing, from the bottom of being very calm and open to the top, where literally when you are in a terror mode, you have almost no ability to think, you have almost no ability to connect. You're only thinking reflexively about how to deal with and reflex to the danger. So we go up and down this through these stages or through these levels based on the level of perceived threat, with our big impacts on both our cognitive and our empathetic capability. A really important point on this too is that every human goes up and down through these levels at a different rate and on different triggers. So we need to begin understanding ourselves, and we need to understand those around us. So that's very important. So here is that previous slide turned on its side and thinking about it from the perspective of performance. So when we are actually at that lowest level, at the most open, while we might have the maximum ability to get our cognitive and empathetic level, we are also not very alert. So what happens is, again, as the cortisol levels raise in our stream, we get to a certain point, and every one of us has an optimal point of positive stress, where that cortisol level has gotten us very focused. It's gotten us to that optimal level. So those of you who have ever think of yourselves maybe as procrastinators, that urgent deadline that you have in front of us gets us to the point where the pressure is enough in our face that we will then turn around and be able to get on it and be very focused. So again, the point I want to make here is that every one of us has a different curve. Every one of us will be at our maximum performance level at a different level of stress. And then the other point I want to make is, once we cross out beyond our optimal, you'll see some more negative things happen. We get anxious, we get disorganized. And one of the things that I will just mention right now is that many of us, because of the COVID crisis, have been pushed over to this right side, just based on those earlier factors that I talked about: the uncertainty, the lack of control, the lack of social interaction, concerns about our health, concerns about financials, concerns about our routine, all potentially have pushed us past our optimal point at this point. So what are the symptoms of stress from a negative perspective once we get out? Well, you may very well have been feeling some of these over the last couple days. Number one, anxiety, just feeling overall anxious. You may have felt a little bit of an irritability. I had somebody say to me the other day, I thought this was interesting, and said, man, I thought I was home. I thought I was going to be able to be really productive because I don't have to go into the office. So I was going to be very productive from a work perspective. I was going to go get organized. I was going to go get my house organized, my office organized. I was going to go clean out my garage. And what I find myself is just kind of sitting there, and I can't get myself motivated. I can't seem to get focused. That would be a typical symptom of the background stress that you're feeling. So you can imagine any of these would be symptoms of the kinds of things that you might be feeling today or any time that you are feeling that stress. So what do we do about it? So there's a couple things. First of all, I like to think about these in two ways. If you are feeling anxious and stuck in the moment with a severe case of any of those previous symptoms, one of the things that you can do in the immediate is do what we call the STOP. It's an acronym for these 4 actions. Number one, if you're feeling that way, literally pause, stop, cut yourself off from what you're doing. Number 2, take deep breaths. What happens when we take deep stomach breaths, really expand our diaphragm, is it resets our cortisol, it resets our blood pressure, and it is nature's way of resetting. So if you've ever seen, for instance, a golfer who is behind a putt that is very, very significant, you'll notice them close their eyes, take deep breaths, and just try to de-stress. So 3 slow, real deep breaths are the second thing. Third thing, what we call observe, and that is basically what we would call labeling. And what that, all it is just saying to yourself, man, I am feeling really frustrated right now because I keep getting disturbed while I'm trying to get something done. Just that act of observing and labeling what is going on has the impact of giving your brain, it's like a braking system for your brain. It slows it down by naming it and acknowledging it. And finally, you can go back, you can proceed. But a real interesting trick is to smile. When we smile, it is one of the fastest ways that we can change our emotional aspects, because what happens is we get oxytocin, which counteracts the cortisol in our system. And smiling, it's very, very hard to feel stressed when you smile. So those are immediate things that you can do if you're feeling anxious in a given moment. Finally, from an overall stress management perspective, here are a couple of the things that you can do to manage your stress in the long term. Number one, I cannot overemphasize how important it is to get your sleep. As adults, unless you're some freak of nature, you need 7 to 8 hours a night. Make the time. It is very, very important for your overall management of your stress and your physical and mental health. So if you struggle with sleep, I would suggest you go Google sleep hygiene, and there are typically really good tips there. Meditation, obviously, which slows us down and gets us present in the moment. Exercise raises some very positive chemicals in our system, endorphins, etc., which give us a feeling of elation and are very, very positive. So getting your, especially good solid exercises every day. Working on something that is meaningful and interesting to you raises a couple chemicals in our brain that are very helpful, again, counteracting cortisol. Achievement, checking things off your list, gives us a little dopamine bump, which again is counteractive. And finally, bonding with other people, laughing, those kinds of things, again, raise the oxytocin levels. So what happens with all of these is it raises a set of chemicals that we in our brain called catecholamines. Catecholamines counteract cortisol and put us in a much better place. So how about doing stress in 15 or 16 minutes? What I'd like to do now is transition back to Camilla, and I'd be glad to entertain any questions people might have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Scott. I feel like I'm going to go around my day smiling everywhere to reduce my stress levels. But we do have some great questions here. I will start with a question from Norbert. Norbert asks, regarding our stress triggers and responses, how are they impacted by the type of person we are? So they're referring to the colors from the Insights Discovery profile. And for everyone else, if you don't know, Insights Discovery is a personal assessment that we use just to understand how we were motivated, understand our communication and our leadership profile. So Norbert is asking, how do we support each other more and better now during this crisis? Please relate this to family, friends, coworkers.
Okay, perfect. Well, a couple background things in that question. There was lots there. So first of all, things like our personality preferences, like insights that you mentioned, what it will tend to do more than anything is impact the level or the speed in which we go up or down those levels of stress. Some of the research would say that extroverts, for instance, tend to go up and down, up faster, but back down faster. Introverts would take a while to get stressed, but once they get there, it takes them a while to come back down. So your preferences would tend to impact the speed in which you go up and down. What most triggers our stresses is the experiences of our life, which are stored in our limbic system. And if you have had a situation in your life that was traumatic, and something might trigger that hey, something that's going on right now is similar to something else that's gone on in my life, previously in my life, and was traumatic, it will trigger a stress response. So much of what triggers different people are the experiences of your life. What can we do around it? Number one, especially around people, is to be calm yourself. Calm yourself down. Don't let yourself get escalated. As you can imagine, if you've ever had a kid having a temper tantrum, it's not very easy to reason with people if you're escalated up towards the top of that stress, at the top of the stages of stress. So calm down. Our emotions are contagious. So if we're calm, we can calm people down. That would be the biggest thing. And the second thing would be just to recognize that people are stressed right now, and just give people a bit of a break. that would be my recommendation.
Another question that we have here, it says, how might a supervisor or boss recognize the signs of stress in their team and react proactively in both normal in-person and virtual situations?
Great question. So any of those symptoms that I showed on a previous slide can show up. So it could be somebody feeling, coming across as being very anxious and hyped up, somebody coming across as irritable, somebody coming across as being disorganized, and particularly if they're normally more organized and they're coming across as not having their act together. Those are symptoms. So if you go back to that slide, any of those symptoms we can recognize. How can we calm those? Number one, again, our own behavior, our own calmness. Number two, checking in emotionally. When you first interact with somebody, how are you doing? Really, how are you doing? What's going on around you? What are the concerns that you're facing right now? Let people label those, let people get them out, and be very empathetic and compassionate about what they're saying. You know, the opposite of saying, "Oh, just get over it. It's all good." Just, you know, those are not empathetic types of reactions. So be empathetic, be calm, and watch for those anxiety or at those various symptoms.
Like that. Another question that we got. So continuing this, what you're saying, Leith is asking, does it help to create structure for each day by creating a daily calendar of time assigned to each activity?
Absolutely. So back to the idea that I said early on that our brain likes routines. We are habitual creatures. And to give you a sense, the general thinking is that about 50% of all the decisions we make every day are habitual, they're routine. It's unloading our brain from having to think about them. So we love routine because we don't have to make all of those thousands of decisions every day. Now our routines have been disrupted. So what do? Having a routine that says, okay, we are going to put some structure in. We are not going to decide in the moment how we're going to handle the day. We're going to have it structured. It relieves our brain of having to keep track of all of that. It puts us into a structure. It unloads our brains from having to make all those decisions.
Yeah. We're receiving a lot of questions. We will have to stop in a few minutes, but we can do probably 2 more questions. And Jessica is asking, what are your thoughts about some opinions who argue that because of all this free time that we have in our hands, we should be more productive than before? We should work harder and do more research, etc.
Yeah, I go back to the point I was making earlier. There is time, but then there is also our ability to focus. And what happens is if we are stressed, it impacts our ability to focus. So while it would be great to have the time, we've also got to be in the right mental state. So a couple of things: having a routine, that's an important one. Having, if you're a boss, recognize that while people have time, they may have other things surrounding them. They may be dealing with kids that are on remote school. They may have a significant other in the house that's also trying to work. So be empathetic and compassionate about people's situations. Just because you have time doesn't mean you have the mental space to be able to be more productive. So it is, as a leader, it is recognizing that about your people. For yourself, I think it is being honest back and saying, listen, I do have more time, but my situation is not, that I've got 12 hours sitting there of open space.
Yeah. Hey, everyone, I know we have a lot of questions. If we don't get to your question here, we will follow up with you and hopefully get back to you with an email with an answer on that question. We will probably do one more question here. So Fawn asks, how long do the effects of stress last?
Another good question. So there are multiple levels. Typically, if it's a very, very strong level of arousal, so let's say your adrenaline kicks in and it's something like that, it will typically come at us like a wave, but it typically dissipates in about 1.5 minutes. So that's a big stressor coming at you. But cortisol stays in our system and keeps coming in. And so when you hear people talking about having chronic stress, you'll hear that word around sometimes. Chronic stress means that you have heightened levels of cortisol all the time. So the best thing to do is the control of that. The time limit is in your control. So the way to counteract cortisol are some of the things that I talked about. Doing your stop. So that will immediately reset your cortisol if if you breathe. Those are some immediate interactions. In the longer term, the other things that I talked about will make a big difference of managing chronic stress. But it is counteracting cortisol with taking an action on your own part.
Awesome. Well, we could stay here the rest of the day answering all the questions, but we do have to stop. And Scott, I just want to thank you so much for being with us today. And for everyone else, if you like this webinar, please join us again next Thursday. We'll be back April 23rd with Kerry Plemons, and he will be teaching us on how to be a virtual team. And then on Thursday, April 30th, we will host Mike Myers from the marketing department on ways artificial intelligence is changing the workplace. And if you like what Scott shared here, you have to learn more about the Denver Leadership Experience. DLX is our award-winning leadership program where Scott is one of the main faculties. We will be following up with an email with more information on that program and key resources from this webinar. So once again, thank you for joining us today. We hope you gain new insight that will accelerate your impact in your community, your organization, and the world. From the University of Denver, Daniels College of Business, Executive Education Department, we look forward to seeing you again on the Accelerate webinar series. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.